Amigo is a new sampler plugin that models the sound of the Commodore Amiga, and it only costs $13. But if it's so cheap, does it actually do anything useful, or did they just slap a bit crusher on a basic sampler, which you can already do in any DAW? The Commodore Amiga was a popular personal computer in the late 80s that, among other things, made possible for people at home to sample and create music on a budget. In that era, studio equipment was prohibitively expensive for most people, so Amiga's sampling capabilities had a huge impact on the early jungle, drum and bass, and rave records.
And we're out of memory.
Of course, due to the tiny amount of available memory and the old-school audio converters that these devices were equipped with, the sound was extremely crunchy with lots of aliasing artifacts. What I noticed while playing around with the Amigo plugin is that transposing samples up and down had a very noticeable effect on their character. And this is not something that you can do with a regular bit crusher, so it seems that it actually emulates the whole sampler engine, which is really cool for this low price. And this is also how Native Instruments Machine's MPC-60 and SP1200 engine works. It's not just an effect, but it recreates how the whole sampler engine behaves. However, it's really not that practical to use Machine as a plugin in your DAW just for that. And this lightweight plugin is much more easy to use. Another great option for a plugin that emulates vintage sampler engines is Style Sampler, and it's much more capable but also quite a bit more expensive than Amigo. So Amigo is made by Potenza DSP in collaboration with an artist called Stecker. It's a pretty basic sampler. I love the whole styling. You can also customize the colors of the UI. By default it doesn't look like this. Now let's say we play this drum loop in its original pitch. It already sounds kind of crunchy, but the real crunch happens when you pitch it down or play a lower note. Super dirty and crunchy sound with lots of aliasing. There is an interpolation setting that makes it sound a bit smoother, but still quite dirty. It works at a sample rate of 22.1 kHz and it's an 8-bit sampler. So this is basically half of what you need to reproduce a sound properly in the digital domain. So there is really no way to obtain a higher fidelity sound from this. And it's really limited. You have tune, pitch, volume, a very basic envelope, but also there are two modes, so you can play the sample up and down the keyboard chromatically. Let's also try this with a melodic sample. You can turn on gate mode so that samples play only as long as you're holding the key. By the way, this sample is from my sample pack The Hit. You can check it out from the link down in the video description. So you can play samples up and down the keyboard, or you can switch to slice mode, and you can either chop the sample manually by just double clicking and adding slice markers, or you can use the threshold automatic slicing. And now it doesn't have any filters or effects, but you can easily add these inside your DAW. And there's also this phase effect. And yeah, obviously they had jungle and drum and bass in mind when creating this plugin. And this is reinforced by the fact that we have the Akai S950 time stretch. So it combines best of Amiga and Akai S950 sound in a single plugin that costs $13. Not bad, not bad. So if you turn on the time stretch, you get these time stretch artifacts that are very characteristic of the S950 time stretch. And by default, the sampler is monophonic, playing only one note at a time, but you can switch to polyphonic mode. And you have a cool feature with the chord memory. This also enables you to get these transposed chords, again, very, very characteristic for early rave, house, jungle music, where you basically get a single chord, usually a sampled chord, and you play it up and down the keyboard. And here they enable you to have that from just a single note. You just hit chord memory, hit record, play a chord on your MIDI keyboard, go out of record, and now you can play this chord up and down the keyboard with a single key. Instant early 90s vibes. But obviously you don't need to limit yourself to 90s sounds with this one. It's just a sampler. You can load anything you want and make anything you want. I used some samples from my sample pack The Heat, again available from the link down in the video description, to create this beat, soulful hip hop beat. So I chopped up this break using Amigo, but I duplicated it and separated the kick and snare on separate channels because you don't really have too much control over separate slices in an instance of Amigo. But this is a really easy workaround, and this sampler is super lightweight. Like, you can run this on a potato. The CPU usage is non-existent. Also, really cool approach when using samplers like this one. You can use loops, pitching them up and down, and you can just get different grooves. So I just used this shaker loop from my pack and this tambourine loop, and just pitching them up and down to get a groove. So here is the groove that I got. So I also used this melodic sample from the Heat pack. I just played the first note up and down the keyboard. I didn't really chop it. Also, one thing I forgot to mention is that this sampler has just a mono output. I didn't really see a way to make the sound stereo, so I added Valhalla Supermassive with the Synth Ensemble preset, which is great for adding stereo information to mono sources. So it made it sound a bit wider. So when we add the Valhalla, a bass line. Again, this is just a single note loaded into Amigo, a vocal pad, and a lead synth. All these have the Valhalla Supermassive on them to make them wider. And for the lead, it even has a glide option and a loop option to extend shorter notes. And since this sampler makes everything sound lo-fi without too much high-end, I used Lifeline Console Lite to regain the high-end, just boosting the high frequencies. So this makes for a bit of a more balanced sound, and it's still quite lo-fi. Definitely a awesome lo-fi sampler for this very, very low price. So why is it so cheap? I think it's just because it's a labor of love of just a handful of people. There's no big marketing budget or anything like that. So I think this is definitely worth supporting. I will leave a link down in the video description. Not affiliated in any way, but also check out my own sample packs and my Ableton Live packs from the link down in the video description. I also have a bundle of all packs for half price. Check it out if you haven't done so yet. And if you enjoyed this video, you might want to check out this one as well. See you there.